right, let's look at warm-up number 9. Number 1 says determine if the equation is true if x equals 4. Can somebody tell me how you might go about solving this problem? What do you think, Raleigh? So you said replace the x with a 4, so that becomes 64. 6 times 4, because remember the relationship right here, this coefficient in front of the x tells you how many x's you have. So if you have 6 x's, that means you have 6 4s. 4 6 times. So it's 6 times 4, so I put it in parentheses. And then follow order of operations on this side. This wants to know if this equals this. So 6 times 4 is what? 24. 24. So 2 plus 24 equals 28. What is 2 plus 24? 26. Does 26 equal 28? No. So it's not true. Yes. Do what? You could put false, or you could put it's not true. Make sure that you know that this means it does not equal. So remember, in 6th and 7th grade, we're trying to find, this is trying to be like a balance. What happens over here should be the same as over here, and that is not true. Okay, determine if the inequality is true if x equals 4. So this is just like an equality, but what we want to know is x plus 13 less than 41. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to use substitution, and we're going to make this x a what? 4. Is 4 plus 13 less than 41? Well, what is 4 plus 13? And is 17 less than 41? Yes, so that is true. Questions on either of those first two? All right. 3. Write an equation to represent the situation. The total cost of 5 equally priced DVDs is $55. How much does each DVD cost? So we have to write an equation. That means it has what? An equal sign. And whatever happens is going to equal what? $55. So if we have 5 equally priced DVDs, what's the math we have to do to find out how much each one costs? What's the math we have to do, Alexis? So I think you already figured out the answer. Use the numbers here, 55 divided by 5, right? So if you have to divide, your equation has to be written in the inverse operation. Right? If we're going to have to divide, what kind of equation do we need to write? What's the inverse of dividing? Multiplying. So, and we need to use a variable. So 5 times the cost of the DVDs equals $55. This is the hard work of this problem, figuring out the equation to write. Because there's a lot of us that intuitively knew that how much do each of those cost? $11. That's kind of the 4th or 5th grade work of the problem. The 7th grade, or actually this is a 6th grade problem, the 6th grade work of this problem, I'm sorry, is writing the correct equation. And so then down here we're going to solve it. 5 times the cost equals 55. Divide by 5, divide by 5. Now, I saw lots of you writing this with this little symbol right here. That is what this is. Do you know where this symbol came from? 5x is this first dot, divided by, is that line, 5. This symbol and this mean the same thing. but lots of you are doing this. That's not the right way to do it. This symbol right here means a number divided by a number. All right, then what do? Cross out 5 divided by 5 leaves you with 1. So we don't write the 1, we write x equals 11. Do we need words? Yes. How much does each DVD cost? What will we say? Each DVD costs $11. And make sure that you understand a $sign is written before the number. It is not written after the number. Each DVD costs. Is it cost or costs? I think it has to be cost. How much? What is the total cost? So each DVD cost. Questions on number 3. So if we were to have this problem and all you wrote was each DVD cost $11, do you think you'd have that right or wrong? It would be wrong because it says you have to write an equation. So this was what we were really looking for, was the equation. So if you just had the answer of $11, it's still wrong because you did not write an equation. All right, 4. Solve the following equation. Who can tell me how to solve this equation correctly? What do I need to do? Noelle? Okay, so did you say you have to subtract the 8 from both sides? Right? Remember, we've got to, what we do on one side of the equal, we have to do on the other. We want the x by itself, so we have to get rid of this plus 8 or this positive 8. What's the inverse or opposite? Subtracting 8. So subtract 8 from that side, so you have a 0 pair, it goes away. Subtract 8 from this side. So you are left with x, that goes away, equals, is it 15? That's your answer. It should look like that. You can't just have the number 15 written. Remember, the standard is what you do on one side, you have to do to the other. Any questions about your warm-up? All right, put it up where you'll know where it's at tomorrow. And I want to look at the homework sheet quickly before we talk about your work for today. So today I'm going to give back your homework and your mid-chapter check from last week. So if you need to make corrections, you can do that. It needs to be back by next Wednesday. Remember, today was the day to turn in corrections on last week's homework. I didn't get a lot of those in. But if you've turned it in, I have already corrected those and changed the grade in Infinite Campus. Last week's homework was probably a little bit better than the week before, but we're still having, some of us are still having some difficulty giving our homework the attention it deserves, meaning you're just kind of getting it done really quickly just so it can be done. Remember, you can take your journal home or you can come to lunch tutoring. All right, so let's look. There's 2 Tuesdays because we weren't here yesterday, but these should not take you very long. Up here, all you're trying to do is find the absolute value of -12. How do I handle this problem? These are like grouping symbols. So you've got to, is there anything you can do inside of those? No, there's no math you can do inside of those, like they're parentheses. So then the next thing you do is you get rid of the grouping symbols. So that becomes what? 15 plus 8. Lots of people last week on your homework, if that was a subtraction problem, you changed it to addition. All you're doing is changing this to the absolute value of negative 15 and this to the absolute value of negative 8. So that problem becomes 15 plus 8. How do I handle this problem? Lots of people change that to 12 plus 15. Is that how I handle that problem, EJ?
You do the absolute value, you get -3 from it, and then you do the absolute value.
Yes, you've got to do the math inside the absolute value bars first. You have to do 12 minus 15 first. And then you're going to get the answer of what? -3. Then you have to find the absolute value of -3. And what is the absolute value of -3? 3, positive 3. I probably shouldn't have helped you with that, but there were so many people that missed it last week, and we do have sample problems like that in our journal. So make sure when you look at a problem like that, if you're unsure, you use your journal, okay? Evaluate Q minus R if Q is -14 and R is -6. Let's see what that looks like if we rewrite it. Q is -14 minus, bring that subtract sign down, and this is -6. So do I need this negative in front of it since I have this subtraction? Yes. 14 minus -6. Those two signs are different. This is the subtract sign, and this is a negative sign. So do you have to have both of them? Yes. And then lots of us are confused about when we keep change, or keep flip change, or keep change flip. We only do that if it's a subtraction problem. There's lots of us that want to do that if this is an addition problem. You have to change a subtraction problem into an addition problem. All right. Why is the absolute value of a number positive? Explain your reasoning. That's probably going to take a sentence or two. All right, down here, do this math. Now, this is addition. What kind of problem is this? Subtraction, change it to addition. What kind of problem is this? What is it? It's multiplication. It can't be addition or subtraction because there's not an addition or subtraction sign between those. That's multiplication. What's this one? Multiplication. What's this one? Multiplication. What's this one? Subtraction. Addition. What's this one? Division. What's this one? Addition. How do I solve this problem? It's add and add. So you work left to right. Work left to right. Let's look at the back. Wave erosion causes a certain coastline to recede at a rate of 3 centimeters each year. This occurs uninterrupted for a period of 8 years. Write a multiplication expression that represents the situation and solve. Explain the solution in terms of the problem. So lots of you in your homework last week did not write an expression or an equation when it asked for it. You just told me the answer and what it meant. So the hard work of this problem is figuring out what multiplication expression to write. And if it's multiplication, you cannot write a division expression. You have to write a multiplication for that to be correct. The change in altitude over time for several hot air balloons is shown. Find the rate of change in feet per minute for each balloon. Rate of change means unit rate. In 7th grade, we call that constant of proportionality. In 8th grade, we call it rate of change. Those all three things mean the same thing. So you want to know how many feet per 1 minute. You have to find the unit rate. You can use a calculator on that. You should probably have that written on your paper. All right. Graph the average temperatures for Earth, Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, Neptune, and Saturn on the number line. Label the points. So, Earth is 59, so that's between a 0 and 100. So it's probably a little more than halfway. And I'm going to call that E for Earth. So that's what you're doing. You're graphing it right on the number line. Put a point and put a letter. You might need to write out Mars because you have a Mars and a Mercury. All right. What is the difference between the highest and lowest temperatures? If the temperatures on Mercury range from negative 279 to 800 degrees. On the mid-chapter check, when it said what's the difference, a lot of people said, well, one is a negative and the other one is a positive. That's the difference. Is that what we mean in math class? What's the difference? Difference means to do what? Subtract. Find out how far apart they are. Don't tell me one's a big number and one's a little number, or one's hot and one's cold. That's not what we mean. We mean the mathematical difference. How much greater is the average temperature on Earth than the average temperature on Jupiter? 4, one of Neptune's moons, Triton, has a surface temperature that is 61 degrees Fahrenheit less than Neptune's. What's Triton's surface temperature? And then the last one, the temperature on Mars can reach a low of negative 187 degrees. Find the value of this expression to determine the temperature in Fahrenheit. So this one, you have to solve up top and then divide it by 5. Up top, you have multiplication and addition. Which one do you do first in order of operations? Multiplication. You multiply, then you add, and the last step is to divide by 5. On these kinds of problems, you work top to bottom and follow the order of operations. You can use a calculator on that one too. Questions about your homework? Do you see they're getting a little bit harder? Yes. So if you have questions, you should come to lunch tutoring. You can come get them checked at lunch tutoring, and then if you need to make corrections, you can do that before you turn them in. Any questions that you saw? All right, let's look at today's work. So it looks like a lot of work because you've got this multiply integers front and back, and then you've got this divide integers. You cannot use a calculator, but you only have to do the odd problems. What that means is this column only. Odd problems today. Flip it over, odd problems. That's this side only, 1, 3, and 5. And then on the division, the odd, that's these right here. If we don't get it done today, we'll finish it tomorrow. If you do get it done, you can work on IXL. I want to look at a couple of problems on this multiply page. Number 1 says negative 4 times 6. What's 6 times 4? 24. And if the signs are different, are they add or subtract? I'm sorry, are they positive or negative? Negative, right? So here's a trick if you're having trouble remembering. You can draw this triangle. This only works for multiply and divide. So plus, minus, minus. That's how you draw it. A plus at the top and a negative and a negative. So if you have a negative and a positive, cover the negative and the positive. So that leaves your answer as a negative. Yes. All right. So then let's look at this one. What's 2 times 8? 16. And what's a negative times a negative? We'll cover up. A negative times a negative leaves you with a positive. So it's a positive 16. 12 times 4 is 48. They're different, so it's a negative, or you could say a positive times a negative is a negative. But this only works for what? Multiplying and dividing. In adding and subtracting, you have to use the rule of the answer is the one that has the greatest absolute value, right? Okay. I want to look at the difference between 6 and 7. Negative 5 squared and negative 5 squared. They look like they would be the same, don't they? What's different? Here the negative is outside, and here the negative is inside. So this means that we are squaring 5. Squaring 5 means 5 times 5, and 5 times 5 is 25. And then we're doing the opposite of that. That means we just bring that over, and it's negative 25. Multiply what's inside the parentheses by itself 2 times. So that's just 5 times 5 is 25, and you just bring that negative over. This is different. This is we're squaring negative 5. That means negative 5 times negative 5. So that's still 25, but a negative times a negative is a positive. So your answer is positive 25. Do you see the difference between those two? That's an important understanding to have. What happens when we get to problems like number 17? Raleigh? And you get 60. Okay, you work left to right. Now, with multiplication and addition, the commutative property says you could change the order. I could do negative 3 times 4 and get negative 12. Then negative 12 times a negative 5 is also a positive 60. But the easiest thing to do if you're unsure is to work left to right. What about 24? I know you don't have to do it, but what would you do? What would be your strategy? Order of operation says you would have to square the 3 first and then multiply by 2. So that would be negative 2 times negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. So your answer would be negative 18. So what you've got to think about is you've really got to think about those order of operations. Questions? Come see me or Mrs. Bent if you have a question when you're working through them. Let's look at the divide integers page. This number is what you're dividing by that number. Negative 15 divided by 3. What's 15 divided by 3? 5. And a negative divided by a positive is a negative. Okay? There are going to be some of them that you may have to do long division like this one. So you may have to do 225 divided by 15. So you may have to do some long division. There's not a lot. And then down here at the bottom, you're going to have to use substitution. These are your numbers. You're going to have to use substitution. If you're not sure how to do those, bring your paper and a pencil and come over and see me. Let's try 19. 19 is negative 8 divided by 4 times n is 2. So you would work top to bottom. There's no math to do up here. So then do this math down here. What's 4 times 2? 8. So then we're going to do negative 8 divided by 8. And what are we going to get? Negative 1. If you have 8 cookies and you split it with 8 friends, everybody gets 1. And a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So do the top, do the bottom, divide. That would be the last step when you have problems like these. If you are having trouble with your multiplication tables, I have some multiplication charts on my desk. You can pick one up and glue it into your journal if you need one. Questions? All right, go ahead and get started. If you've got a question, see me or Mrs. Bent, not your neighbor.